In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 70. Right now, it's entitled Andrew and Jerry Tell the Truth About the Hamas-Israel War, though Jerry and I were contemplating episode 70 being Andrew and Jerry Miss Bench Seats in Cars. Good morning, Jerry Rogers.
Good morning. Or what was the other? Hamas,
Hospitals, and Holy War.
That's right.
The Triple H, which isn't bad.
Well, I mean, and let's start there because, you know, in the good old days when we did have a bench seat up front and you could sit next to your girlfriend, the lines of right and wrong were clear. Right. And even though the media back in the day, you know, the Peter Jennings network, or who was the White House correspondent that sparred with Reagan?
Sam Donaldson.
The media was tough and liberal, but at the end of the day, there were differences in politics, but they were differences in degree. Today, we just have differences in kind.
Right.
And, you know, we had this hospital tragedy where the world, the AP, all of these media outlets, but also these myriad countries all blamed Israel for bombing, for rocketing Gaza hospital. It turns out that it's more likely it was a rocket fired from the area of the hospital that didn't make it and fell back down on the hospital. The most
fascinating part of that aspect of the story, Jerry, is that the proof of that comes from a video clip from an Al Jazeera newscast. Right, Al Jazeera, obviously no friend to this situation, has been repeating all kinds of Hamas propaganda, as we would expect them to do, because it is Al Jazeera after all. Al Jazeera had this video. They were shooting film, and they were invited by Hamas to come and film the start of the attack. And you see in this Al Jazeera film a rocket, you know, going up in the air and then stopping and then falling and then an explosion where the hospital is.
And then the IDF apparently is monitoring to the extent they're able, Hamas communications.
Yeah.
And you could actually hear, you know, the Hamas fighters, terrorists, saying, was that ours? Is that ours? Yes, it's ours.
Yeah.
It's just, it's bizarre.
But
then again, you and I, we're doing our little podcast and we know the truth and report the truth. But the Associated Press gets it wrong.
Well, but here's the thing, Jerry, and this is what gets me. So I watched this morning on CNN an interview with between whoever the CNN anchor was and Congressman Seth Moulton, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts. He's on the Armed Services Committee. They're getting a classified brief this afternoon. We're recording this podcast on Wednesday morning. And the CNN anchor, now this is CNN, right? This is not Fox. This is not MSNBC. The CNN anchor says, well, you know, Congressman, how can we be sure? Oh, I'm sorry. As the CNN anchor is introducing the congressman, she says, well, we have this footage, we have this story, and CNN cannot independently verify which side fired this rocket or which side caused the explosion to happen. CNN, we cannot determine, even though it's really clear what's going on here. And essentially, she asked this question to Seth Moulton, who gives, you know, which is kind of a standard. Well, I believe, you know, the president of the United States, you know, that he wouldn't lie to me, which is like, you know, thanks for nothing, Seth Moulton, for that.
But however, just to comment on that, Joe Biden landed in the Middle East, in Israel, and he said no. It was what did he say? He more or less said
it was the other side.
It was their team, not our team.
Yeah. Yes. And by the way, so as we're recording this, let us sort of set things up for where things are, because as we just said, there was this hospital explosion yesterday. We also don't know really how many people were killed there, but set that aside for a moment. Because Hamas is claiming that 500 people were killed. We have not been able to verify that. And we all know that Hamas has, and I'm going to say this, has staged scenes before and has used old footage before to make it look like there's more casualties than there are.
Again, just to emphasize your point, Hamas a week ago Saturday sent terrorists into Israel,
right,
to rape, to murder, to abuse and torture and kidnap. I don't understand why anyone would take anything seriously coming from Gaza, coming from Hamas. And just one last thought, the president, there was news reports that he was going to meet with Hamas leadership, Hamas leaders today, but Hamas refused because of this hospital incident. I don't want my president meeting with the head of a jihadi group, of a terrorist group, of a group literally sending men to rape children. This is what Hamas is.
Let's be fair, Jerry. He just sent $6 billion to Iran. Hamas is getting some of that money.
Well,
Joe,
and again,
the big guy just wants us doing proper, Jerry. It goes back
to how we started. I'm sorry, but it goes back to how we started. There was a time when it didn't make a difference your party affiliation or your political preference. We all called out evil.
Right.
It seems to me that there are too many defenders at CNN, at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and myriad other media outlets that are calling for a ceasefire. They're calling for a de-escalation. In other words, hey, Jews, make it easier for us to kill you.
Right.
That's essentially what the media is saying.
Let me set this up. So we did our show a couple of weeks ago when the big thing was Matt Gaetz, and we were talking about the shutdown, and we didn't know what was going to happen with the speakership. And so that was the other things that are swirling around. Now the speaker thing is still swirling around. We may get to that later on in the show. In fact, we probably will. But the 3 days after we did our show, this horrific attack happens. Jerry and I couldn't do a show last week. He was doing radio during the week. I was doing radio during the week. So here we are today. We had this horrific attack. And in the last week, and this is a good chunk of what Jerry and I are going to talk about today. We have watched an insane, and I'm going to use this, I'm going to say this, because I always put this in quotes, so-called pro-Palestinian narrative emerge, and what Jerry and I have also noticed is a disturbing trend and the real unmasking of what the left would call anti-Zionism, and they used to try to distinguish between anti-Zionism, and for those of you who don't know, anti-Zionism means people who are against a Jewish state in Israel.
And let me sum it up. If you're an anti-Zionist, you're an anti-Semite.
That's the point. That's the point that I'm making. Is that there used to be
this Jews.
Thin veneer. You would have some folks almost saying, "Oh, I'm not an anti-Semite. I'm just an anti-Zionist." And even folks in the Jewish community. Well, obviously, I'm not anti-Jewish because I'm Jewish. I'm just an anti-Zionist. Well, no, I'm sorry. If you are a Jew and you are professing, the New York Post just had a thing up today. Wallace Shawn protesting against the evil in Gaza. Let me put it to you this way, and it's real simple and straightforward, because there's this horrific story out of this. No good deed goes unpunished. If you're Wallace Shawn or any other Jew who is advocating and saying that Israel and the IDF needs to go easy on Hamas, that this is horrific what Israel is doing in response to, by the way, to try to rescue almost 200 hostages that are being held and to neutralize a threat which has already killed more than 1,000 Israeli citizens. I'm sorry, you are doing the bidding of the other side. This is my point. No good deed. Do you think for a second that simply because and this gets into stuff we've talked about on the left before. I'm sorry, Jerry. I know I'm on a roll here, on a rant here.
You're good.
Do you think that because you have said the magic words, "Oh, I'm an anti-Zionist. Oh, I want to believe in the peaceful Palestinians." And let me say this again. If you're listening to me every time I say Palestinians, I'm using air quotes. We'll get to the reason for that in a second. Do you think that if you were not in Israel and Hamas had you in their crosshairs, that they would not kill you just as easily as they would kill any other Jew in Israel? No,
of course.
You are a Jew first and foremost. Therefore, you will kill them. And the only reason why they have not been able to engage in a slaughter on the scale of the Nazis in and before World War II is because they simply don't have the means to do it. If they had the means to do it, they would be out there systematically killing Jews. Sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
But also I just want to again clarify and emphasize, it's, you know, killing a Jew almost in this context. If you were on Saturday, October 7th, if you were an IDF soldier and you were killed in combat, it's almost merciful, because what they did to citizens is unspeakable.
Yeah.
To civilians, burning babies, torturing and raping children and young girls,
right?
Shooting teenagers in the back as they flee,
right?
Torching cars with teenagers trying to escape, burning them alive. This is horrendous. This is evil. This is the devil. This is terror. And I want to be very clear about this. Hamas cannot exist any longer.
Right.
And Gaza as it has been cannot exist anymore. You know, it cannot.
Let's set the Wayback Machine and let's talk a little bit about this so that our listeners can understand, and anybody who's joining us who's never listened to the show before can understand this situation. And this gets into why I use the phrase so-called Palestinians, and I put the concept of Palestinians in air quotes. It is because the concept of the Palestinian as a Muslim and as a Muslim existing in Israel and having their own nation state is a modern concept that has no basis in
it's a lie.
reality.
It is an absolute lie.
Right. Yes.
The Muslims are the invaders.
Yeah.
The Muslims are the colonizers.
Yes.
You know, the Muslims are those conducting apartheid government. All of these slanders, the apartheid state Israel, the colonizers, the invaders, again, this is upside down revisionist history. The Jews have existed in Israel for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Right. There wasn't even a Muslim in walking the earth until what? The 7th century, 6th century.
Like that. Yeah.
You know, and you know, here's the history. The history is a history of the judges, and the people of Israel. And then it was they wanted a king, so then they had King Saul and King David and King Solomon, and then the myriad kings after. Then the kingdom split, Israel and Judea, and then you had the conquests and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and these wars and the Romans. The difference is the Jews never left.
Right.
In fact, Nebuchadnezzar, right? Was Nebuchadnezzar or was it Nehemiah? No, it was Nebuchadnezzar. Nehemiah was the prophet. Yes. Nebuchadnezzar let the Jews rebuild the temple. So there has been the Jews are indigenous to Israel. The Jews, their holy city and capital city has always been Jerusalem. The Muslims have no historic claim on Jerusalem.
Nehemiah was a factor to the Persian Emperor Artaxerxes, who did such great service to Artaxerxes that Artaxerxes granted him his wish to go and rebuild.
Right? Did I? I said Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not sure when.
No,
Nebuchadnezzar.
You said Nebuchadnezzar. They're two different. Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar was one, and Nehemiah was another. Nehemiah is one of my favorite.
But even if I get my my Old Testament history a little wrong here, the fact of the matter is, it was the Muslims. Then fast forward to approaching modern times.
Right.
You had Jews in Israel. And then you had the Muslim invaders in the 7th century, and they began to murder and to expel Jews.
Right.
And then it was a barren land.
Well, right. And let's also not forget that the threat at the time was, right, the what helped galvanize, I will say this, what helped galvanize the Muslim movements into, and consolidate their power under various emperors and potentates.
Yeah.
The Crusades happened, right? The many Crusades that happened.
Which, by the way, the Crusades were a response to Islamic war.
Right.
These were defensive wars, but so the Muslims forced the Jews out.
Yeah.
But then the Muslims don't do anything. Israel more or less is abandoned.
Right.
And then the Jews begin to return.
So what happens is at the same time, hold on, let me get into the sort of the modern Jewish history here for a second, Jerry. So in the 18th and 19th centuries and into the early 20th centuries, there and pretty much throughout post Dark Ages European history, I mean, we could talk about the issues of blood libel, but what would happen is that Jews would get expelled from various areas. They would be allowed to settle, generally because you had European monarchs who wanted to borrow money. The Jewish moneylenders, and this is not aspersions, this is historic fact here. In fact, Daniel Pipes writes a great deal about this in his book Property and Freedom. When the moneylenders when the European monarchs would get so in debt to the moneylenders, then they would expel them. And so there have always been these boom and bust cycles, depending on how, you know, these entities treated their Jewish residents. But there was almost always some kind of economic decline that followed some kind of pogrom happening. Usually, sometimes it was putting
right. And so then the Jews began to return to Israel. That was barren. But I want to say this.
Yeah.
Then but what did the Jews do? They created culture and society and farms, and then the Arabs, the Muslims, were like, "Hey, look what the Jews did!"
Right.
And then the Muslims came back.
Yes.
And then you fast forward to the Ottoman Empire and the British Mandate. But the fact of the matter is,
you get to post World War I.
Right.
You have Britain sort of advancing hegemony in the area after sort of getting rid of the Ottoman Turks and other influences, and because they want a control of the oil. And so the point is, in 1948, after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, there is a real push by Jews who want to get the hell out of Europe, and they want to defend themselves and make sure that the Shoah doesn't happen again. Shoah is another word for Holocaust, for those of you who don't know. That the Shoah doesn't happen again. They want their own homeland. And so with international cooperation, the Israelis, the Jews, they found the nation of Israel. Now, anybody who lives within Israel can become an Israeli citizen and participate in the Israeli political process. This is why when Jerry talks about this issue of the apartheid being a myth, or more to the point, a system being created by Hamas and the Palestinians, that's what he's talking about here. That Arabs living within Israel's borders have always had the opportunity to become Israeli citizens, but they choose to not do so. They choose to live as non-citizen residents of Israel. And they do this, and we can get into something that I just read yesterday. It was just so stupid. Because they are so hell-bent on wanting their state and nothing less than having their own Jew-free state. And frankly, right, Jerry, I don't think I'm overstating this here. It's not limited to West Bank and Gaza.
No, it's all
they
Israel.
Want the whole,
to
use a Yiddish term,
from the river to the sea, to the river to the sea.
Megillah. They want it all, and they want
what are U.S. College students chanting at universities and colleges? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. That leaves no room for Israel.
Right. Well, it leaves no room for Israel, and the point is, again, sort of people try to have it both ways. Well, that doesn't mean that they want to eliminate the Jews. They just want them out of Israel. They just want them out of Palestine. They want them out. Well, no. What it means is, and again, this gets into the Hamas charter. The Hamas charter calls for the destruction and the death of Jews.
The Hamas and the Palestinians do not want to liberate Palestine. They want to conquer and destroy Israel. And what makes me crazy is, and I might have butchered a little bit of the history, but you did
fine. Hold on, I want to be really clear about this. You did fine. My bringing up Nehemiah was not to correct you. It was to supplement.
But the fact of the matter is that the Jews have always had a presence there. Even the West Bank. We're talking a lot about Gaza. The West Bank, Nazareth, the city of Jesus, or where Jesus was born, is in the West Bank.
Right.
Hebron. is in the West Bank. Jerusalem is in the West Bank. The West Bank is Samaria and Judea. It's Israel.
Yes.
The West Bank is not Palestine. It's
Right.
Israel. And here's the biggest mistake Israel has made over the past 75 years, 78 years. How long has Israel been in existence? Since 1948?
1948, so 75 years.
So the biggest mistake has been their constant offering up land, Jewish land, for peace.
Right.
What Israel should do now, if they're not going to do it after October 7th, then it'll never be done, and Israel will live in perpetual war. They need to send the Gaza citizens, civilians, to Egypt, and they need to send the West Bank Palestinians to Jordan,
Right. Well,
and claim everything for Israel.
Well,
and that's it.
See, here's the thing, right? And
I'm a Zionist. That's a Zionist position,
right? The point is, or if you're going to stay, then you will become an Israeli citizen.
Yes, right.
And you will be subjected to, I mean, everybody's subjected to Israeli law, but you will become a citizen. But you cannot remain here as a non-citizen resident, whose goal and right. And now we could talk about free speech, something you're deep.
But the thing is, Muslims in Israel have full rights of citizenship.
But again, no, but this is my point. My point is this: even in America, where we have great free speech rights, if you advocate for the violent overthrow of the American government, you will be prosecuted for this, right? That's the thing that gets me here, is that something in the end, right? You become an Israeli citizen. And then, if you engage in seditious acts, something, you go to jail for it. And that's just the way it is. And that's not a violation of human rights. That's not a violation of civil rights. That's just the way it is. Sorry, Jerry. Now, because this is the thing that gets me, because somebody the military expert, who I've known for many, many years, said something yesterday about this issue of the Palestinians want their own nation. They want their own state. They will accept nothing less. To which I said, something, I want to still be 17 years old and trying to go after cheerleaders, but something, that ain't my thing anymore.
Well,
I'm a 52-year-old guy. I'm married, and this is my life, and I love my life, but this is, at some point in time, you gotta wake up and realize.
Right. Well, unfortunately, the United States, Great Britain, the European powers, and also the political establishment in Israel still believe in a two-state solution.
Well, and that was
I think the Palestinian Muslims and Arabs need to go back to where they're from. And I want to be clear about this. They're not from Palestine. Gaza for decades was not a protectorate, but it was a zone that Egypt governed. And even now, the so-called, Egypt, Israel is blockading Gaza, causing all this problem. There's no water, electricity, there's food or medicine. Well, number one, the reason why it's blockaded is because of the Hamas's war against Israel, but also Egypt is blockading Gaza. Number one. Number two, ask yourself the question, in goodness name, why can't Gaza produce its own water? Right. It sits on. We talked about this the other day. You and I off mic. Yeah. It sits on this reservoir. It has access to water. The problem is that the infrastructure aid, the humanity aid that went to Gaza, the piping and the infrastructure mechanisms, the Hamas stole to use for weapons. Right. And so that reservoir of water has been polluted. Hamas did this.
Can we just turn? I want to turn back a second to this thing about the two-state solution and the problem of intellectualism. And I'm not an anti-intellectual person, but this is the problem of progressive intellectualism that has no basis in reality, trying to invent its own surreality. And I will tell you something. Listen, as someone who was born Jewish, raised culturally Jewish, went to a high school that was largely, populated by, let me explain this, was largely populated by Jews. Ethical humanism, I went to an ethical humanist high school, the Society of Ethical Culture. Ethical humanism was a movement established by a guy. Are you familiar with ethical humanism at all, Jerry?
I am.
Okay. So it was founded by a guy named Felix Adler. And Felix Adler's father, I believe, was the chief rabbi at Temple Bethel, which is the big temple on the Upper East Side of New York, big temple on the Upper East Side. And Adler and other younger Jews of his generation, they wanted to assimilate more into society. Now, Jews at that point in America were starting to get assimilated, but they were still shut out of many institutions at the time. So Felix Adler started ethical humanism as a movement that sort of rejected the idea of it was essentially faith without faith, in the same way that Unitarian Universalism is faith without faith, right? There's no core belief in Unitarian Universalism. I've known folks who've sort of bridged the gap between universalism and ethical humanism. And so the idea is to go down this road of trying to grapple with these issues and be culturally Jewish without being religiously Jewish. And so you have these ethical humanist, culturally Jewish Jews who want to be good to everybody. They want to they don't want to be harmed, so therefore they think that if they don't harm others, or they don't put up a defense, or they're accommodating, then they will do right in the world.
Pragmatic. They believe in pragmatism,
right?
And ethics or morals are based upon reason.
Yes.
If we could just be we can reason with each other.
A reasonability, Jerry, because there's a difference between reason and reasonability, right? Because you and I are grounded. Of course, the phone's ringing.
But here's the thing. But how does an ethical humanist reason with Hamas? It's impossible.
Well, that's exactly it. This gets into this woman who was killed over the weekend, or in that raid a little over a week ago, right? Someone who had settled on the border with Gaza because they wanted to try to find some accommodating solution for the Gazan Palestinians. When the Gazans attacked her and her husband, of course, they weren't armed, because these are people who don't believe in arms. They had a safe house, Jerry, or a safe room in their house that they went to, which essentially is the cage, the oven in which your enemies are going to kill and cook you in.
Yeah.
That's what they had. So they were trying to be reasonable, but what they were saying wasn't rooted in reason. You see what I'm saying in terms of the difference?
Of course.
It gets into what my dad has said, and I've said this many times on the show. I say the most well-intentioned policies eventually bump up against a very real reality, right? There's an intention here. We have the intention of do good and being nice to other people. And as my dad then says, there are many roads to utopia, all must traverse the surface of the earth. And so the reality here is that there are people who hate you and they will kill you. And it doesn't matter how reasonable you are, how nice you are to them, they will gun you down nevertheless. They will behead your babies nevertheless.
Rape your daughter in front of you. Rape your wife in front of you. That's what they did. Look, this is evil. And it makes me sick to hear Jake Tapper talking with Jake Sullivan. Tapper, of course, is a CNN anchor. Jake Sullivan is the
former senior national security person.
He's a national security advisor to Joe Biden. And Tapper does the whole, look, what Hamas did is evil. I'm not going to defend it. But literally, he says, but what Israel is doing in Gaza isn't that also a tragedy? No.
Right.
You cannot attack, murder, rape, burn, destroy, torture, and then when you seek justice, call justice and say no justice. I pray in the morning with my kids on the way to school. We pray for lots of things together. What we've been praying since October 7th is peace in Israel, but victory in Israel.
Yeah.
And if we want justice and we want morality and ethics, Hamas has to be destroyed. And listen to me. It's not just Hamas fighters. The Palestinian, so-called Palestinian people are guilty as well because they chose Hamas. This is the problem with nation building and with George W. Bush's strategies in Iraq and Afghanistan, if we can only give them democracy, well, you give them democracy and then they vote for Hitler.
Yeah.
And then they vote for Hitler, and you wonder why you have Nazi policies. The fact of the matter is that you cannot negotiate, you cannot reason with Hamas or these Palestinians. You have to either remove them or kill them. And I know there are innocents, but the fact is that Egypt should take in the innocents. Jordan should take in the innocents. Syria. There are how many Arab in the Arab League? How many Arab Muslim states?
Right. Well, there are 17 countries in the Middle East. There's the so-called Middle East, but that's not even counting North Africa. You're right, Jerry. Right, because there's the entire northern coast of Africa that is entirely Muslim. And oh, by the way, many of these nations very wealthy and can easily take people in and give them jobs. You know, Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, you know, any of these nations should be taking people in. But let me just I want to gin on something for a second, because we haven't really touched on the anti-Semitism here in America and where it has come from, because we didn't wake up.
I called you yesterday. What did I say to you? I said, you know, I've always said that systemic racism existed in America, for decades and centuries. You know, the Jim Crow South, and the marriage laws and the separate but equal and all the rest of that horrific systemic racism. However, you know, since the 60s and 70s and 80s and the 90s, we have eradicated systemic racism in America.
Right.
It doesn't exist. Systemic racism doesn't exist. It exists insofar as if you are a white male, you're not getting into Harvard. If you're a white male working class kid, the son of a police officer, there's no chance you'll go to the Ivy League in this country any longer. But besides, I was I'm
not sure of an alternative sexuality, Jerry, but
I had an epiphany yesterday because I was listening to the news and I thought to myself, oh my God. And I'm not taking your Lord. I'm not taking your name in vain, Lord. There is systemic racism, except it's anti-Jewish.
Yeah.
Our media is systemically racist, anti-Semitic.
And this has been it has for many years the underpinning of anti-Semitism.
Our universities are systemically anti-Jewish.
It was simmering under. And again, you could couch the anti-Semitism. Many folks would couch their anti-Semitism and say, I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm just anti-Zionist. I believe that.
I mean, let's be honest. They would say, take Congresswoman Oman.
Yeah, Ilhan Omar.
Omar, I'm sorry.
Yeah, or Rashida Tlaib, either one.
Tlaib, AOC, Priestley. You know who they are. Jamal Bowman.
Alana Presley.
Yeah. There are a host of Democrats who are essentially saying, and I'm going to exaggerate to make a point, but it's not a great exaggeration. They essentially say, you know, I really am, my heart is broken over the death of these innocent Jews, but we really have to kill more Jews to have peace in the Middle East.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
But so my point is that stretching your memory back, and this gets into everything that is wrong sort of with the secular progressive left and the inculcation, the infiltration of our higher education institutions, where, you know, it starts off very subtle, sort of raising the question about Palestinians. Oh, and by the way, I want to get into the sort of go further back in terms of the grift, because you and I spent a lot of time in the last show talking about grifters and the grifter class. We spent a lot of time talking about this because that plays into all of this as well. But you know, it used to be that you know, they would talk about Palestine and the Zionism issues, and they could re-educate kids that way, starting very slowly back then. But Jerry, getting into what you're talking about in terms of the systemic racism issue, and this came to a head again back at my high school. You can go look this up. New York Times did a big story on this, because to the radical folks in the so-called anti-racism movement, Jews are no different than other white people, because Jews can
Oh,
hide in their,
if I had a dinger, I would ding it.
Jews can,
You just said it.
yeah, Jews can
Yeah.
hide in their whiteness.
Listen,
And
I said this on my radio show,
yeah,
and I on WBAL, and I got some pushback from callers and anti-Semitic people who called in. The reason why the left, the media, the universities, look, the Harvard president of Harvard issues a statement and really just messed up. Then issued a second statement on these protests at Harvard, these pro-Palestinian, anti-Jewish, kill the Jew protests. Tried it a second time, failed. Third time, she makes this a statement, and she says that they're not going to. We condemn the violence against Israelis, but we're not going to stifle free speech and expression. Okay, fine. Except you do stifle free speech and expression when it is a Christian leader or a conservative leader wanting to speak out. You want your safe place. You want censorship. You want to, you want to crack down on free speech. Again, but here's why Harvard can do this and why the media can do this. And you just said it. This is the most brilliant thing of our program today. It's because everything the left does is race.
yes,
Or identity politics. Right. And so that's why you have Black Lives Matter, the media, the Democratic Party, progressives, the socialist, democratic socialists. This is why you have professors in academia. This is why you have this hatred for Jews, because at the end of the day, they're white. Yes. Jews are white. Yes. And Hamas, they're people of color.
Yes.
That's what it comes to. That is how base and how racist the left, the progressive ideology is.
And let me just say that this is not without proof. So go back. I urge you all, if you're doubting the story, go back and Google New York Times articles on this. Fieldston, F-I-E-L-D-S-T-O-N, Fieldston School, and racial affinity groups. And you could probably Google some version of the phrase "hide among their whiteness." So Fieldston was trying to re-educate not just kids, but parents, Jerry. There was a mandate that not only did these kids have to have these racial affinity sensitivity meetings, but parents were going to have to go this. If you send your kids to, and I don't think it ever went, I don't know how far it went, but at least the proposal was, if you sent your kids to these schools, you as a parent were required to attend these training sessions on race. And so they were dividing kids. I mean, I thought we as an American society, Jerry, were beyond the idea of dividing people into groups based upon their race. But Fieldston was doing this.
Let's just be honest. Nazism, National Socialism is alive and well.
Yeah.
It exists in Gaza. It exists at Harvard. It exists at CNN. It exists. Look, Andrew, after the George Floyd, what was it? Floyd. I'm sorry. How I can mispronounce his name after the wreckage post his death. But you had every CEO, every media, every Hollywood star condemning the George Floyd incident. Never mind the fact that, you know what, I'll say this. Never mind the fact that he was high on drugs. Never mind the fact that he had a violent criminal history. Never mind the fact that he tried to pass counterfeit money and steal, all that, the fact that he was a criminal. We conveniently forgot that, and we allowed our nation to burn for an entire summer.
Yeah.
And I raised this because Floyd, he was on the lips of every CEO, of every important person in America condemned. Where are the CEOs today condemning what happened October 7th in Israel?
Right.
Where are this? There's complete silence. Where is corporate America today, saying that if you're pro Hamas, if you celebrate the death of Israeli infants, you know what? We think that's wrong.
Yes.
But a criminal dies, and again, and I understand that the knee on the neck and the procedures there. Okay, but the nation burned for months after that.
Right.
And Black Lives Matter received tens of millions of dollars from corporate interest and corporate.
Which by the way, they sent to Palestine. Go ahead. Or sent to Hamas.
Right. I mean, I hope at the very least this is what happened October 7th, the human cost. But I hope it's also an awakening for reasonable people to look and say Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization, is an evil organization,
a supporter of terrorism, to say the least. Yes.
You saw what Black Lives Matter did in terms of the hang gliders, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
They were celebrating Black Lives Matter, literally. Was sending out memes on social media celebrating the Hamas terrorist who hang glided into a music festival and raped and murdered children and teenagers. That's Black Lives Matter. But then again, how do you separate Black Lives Matter from the rest of the intersectionality movement? From the transgendered movement, from the progressive movement, from critical race theory, from queer theory. It's all the same.
Right. And this is the thing. And I know, listen, I would hope that within the leftist movement, that the pro-Israel side would be educating, the other spokes, in the wheel of intersectionality, the LGBTQIA and this and that and the other thing, so that maybe they would say, hey, maybe, just maybe, if you are a queer organization, you don't come up with a march that says Queers for Palestine, because maybe, just maybe, you should recognize that if you were there, and I've seen this, I've seen folks pushing back on, oh no, I was a gay person and I was in Gaza and I was treated like royalty, something.
You're a liar.
If Hamas found out that you were there and you're an American gay person, you would be kidnapped.
But it's not just Hamas. If you're a gay person in Iran, they literally hang you in the public square and leave your body. I mean, I was talking to my 13-year-old. Because we've been talking about Israel in my house, to our listeners, if you have children, don't let them learn about this war or 100%. About the Israeli history from the TV or from their history teachers. You teach them, so I've been doing that. Yeah. And my 13-year-old said to me, we were driving to school, and she said, "Dad, I don't get it." I'm like, what don't you get, sweetheart? If you're a gay person in Iran, and Iran, Dad, is backing Hamas, right? Yes. Yeah. Yes, thank you. You can make that connection, but the president of the United States has yet to make that connection. Think about that for a second. The president, we're now days and days after this terrorist attack in Israel on October 7th, and the president still hasn't uttered the word Iran. Yeah. Okay? My daughter did. Yeah. 13 years old. Anyway, she said, in Iran, if you're gay, they kill you in public. I said, I know. And she said, I don't understand how are these, she used the word liberal. I think the progressive movement and the liberal and good liberals have separated. But she said, how do these liberals support Hamas? You know what, 13-year-old girl, you have more wisdom in that question than Jake Tapper does on CNN.
It never ends in terms of being able to teach, because I will say this. I got a phone call. I don't talk much about my kids these days. My younger one is a sophomore in college. Called me a week ago Monday and said, "Hey, Dad, can you take me to lunch?" And she wanted to talk about what was happening in Israel and understand. I'm not going to go down this road and get more personal about this. I mean, it's.
But what if you're a kid on a college campus, at Harvard, at any number? I mean, there are dozens and dozens of schools, elite university, George Mason. I mean, you name the school, and they have had protests, but it's worse than that. They are targeting Jews. They're targeting supporters of Israel. There's violence. They're not reporting it. There are children on college campuses are being attacked physically by so-called peace protesters, pro-Palestinian
being
protesters.
attacked physically and also being made to feel ostracized by professors, by members of the faculty who are actively cheerleading what Hamas is doing. That's the thing that gets me, right? I mean, it's and we've now seen the videos. I put one up last week and talked about on the air last week something that happened in England, and there's an expectation, right? And I'm going to say this again, given the havoc that Muslim refugees have wreaked on every nation in Europe in the last 15 years, and they have wreaked havoc on them.
And again, this isn't for this show, Andrew, but just let's do a teaser for a show down the line. Immigration policy has a real impact on our culture,
right?
And again, just I want to emphasize this: in America, we are not bound by race or by creed or religion, blood. We are bound by our shared values,
right?
And what's happening is that both administrations, both parties, for different reasons, have allowed massive waves of immigration with no assimilation.
Yes.
And so essentially what's happening in America is the same thing that is now happening in London and is happening in Paris. You have two nations. So you have two people groups.
But it's not, but you can, we can talk about the immigration issue, but it's also, when you've torn at the shared values of who we are as a people, and you populate the institutions that are supposed to be teaching our more intellectual young people, right? That's presumably, the people who are in college, and you have students who are essentially being encouraged. Now, I don't have any video that says that students are being encouraged to tear down flyers underscoring kidnapping. Hold on, Jerry. But certainly they have professors who are tacitly encouraging them. They are emulating what they are being taught. So when you have a professor on a campus who is actively cheering Hamas for their attack at a music festival, and again, as we've said, and we're going to say it a number of times, the rape of young women, the murder of babies.
They hang glided in, and they took 16-year-old girls and raped them, and then killed them,
And so the point is, when you have that, it's then not a great leap where you then start seeing students on American campuses ripping down flyers that discuss the victims of kidnapping, people still being held by terrorists in Gaza. And that's where we are in America in 2023, where it is acceptable, right? And I say it's acceptable because students that are ripping down these posters, encouraging these posters to talk about kidnapping, they're not being punished, and they are being encouraged by faculty members.
They're getting extra credit in courses, Andrew.
Oh, that I haven't heard.
Yes, there are reports that there are professors, news reports from center-right venues saying, with evidence about university professors giving extra credit for students to show up at these pro-Hamas rallies.
It's amazing.
Listen, here's what I'm going to do. I am not going to let anyone in my presence say something that is wrong about Israel ever again.
Yeah.
If I am at my kid's soccer game or football game, and I hear someone say, "Well, the Israeli apartheid state," I am going to stop what I'm doing, walk over, and say, "That's a anti-Semitic lie." It's Hamas. Listen, it's
Jerry,
Hamas it's Hamas who teaches young children to hate Jews.
Right.
It is Hamas that steals water and energy and resources and medicine from its own people.
Oh, and let's be really clear, by the way, Jerry and I have not, the one thing you have not heard us say, now we have talked about wanting to destroy Hamas. We've talked about, having Palestinians leave or assimilate, right?
Right.
But we have not said that we hate Arabs or Muslims. We have not said we want to harm or kill Muslims generally. So that, it is a core principle here, but the other side is the one that is teaching their kids that Jews need to be killed and destroyed. We need to live in a Jew-free world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our media, again, every time you hear someone at the Washington Post or CNN say ceasefire now, de-escalate now,
Jerry,
they are worse than accommodators.
Sorry, they're worse than a comment, but I want to underscore something here, because this is a conversation I wanted to have with you on the air last week when you graciously came on my show, that there are two, right? When you talk about an apartheid state, obviously South Africa comes to mind. And when you talk about the struggles against
and the American South under democratic governors,
okay, but let's talk about. I want to talk about South Africa, and I want to talk about Northern Ireland, and how they are distinctly and importantly and materially different than this situation. In South Africa, you had two separate European countries. You had the Dutch and you had the British that colonized South Africa. And they created an environment in which blacks, regardless of their allegiance, could not participate in that society. It was quite literally living separately and living as a servant class, but they had no ability to participate in the political process. That's not the case in Israel with Arabs and even so-called Palestinians. About 10% of the Israeli parliament is Arab. And people who, if you are a Muslim and you want to live in Israel and you want to become an Israeli citizen, you are welcome with open arms, and you are allowed to participate in their political process freely and openly. And so, and by the way, again, as Jerry and I have pointed out, it's not like what happened in South Africa, where you had Britain and Holland or the Netherlands, the Dutch, colonizing South Africa and essentially displacing the indigenous population. I would also dare say that it is a different struggle than Ireland and Northern Ireland, again, because sorry, go ahead, Jerry.
No, again, and I mentioned to you this week that I've heard Irish members of Parliament, and I'm ashamed of what they're saying. It is as if they have taken the Hamas pill and are the vitriol but the vitriol based upon wrong information and revisionist history. Listen, about 20% of Israel, the state of Israel, citizens are Arab.
Yes. And
they participate in every part of Israeli society. They can run for office. I mean, there is no separation.
Right.
The Irish in Ireland proper, but in Northern Ireland in particular, for generations, their language was taken away.
Right.
They were prohibited from holding public office. They weren't allowed to run for office if you're Irish. In Ireland, you couldn't run for office because the British said you couldn't. You could not have your language. You could not have your schools. The priests were outlawed. You could not practice your religion.
Right.
You had to live separately. I mean, it got to the point where in the 1850s, the English took all of the crops from Ireland as tax, and then left Ireland with a blighted potato famine. The famine was genocide. It was a genocide. It was a planned genocide. My point is that that's apartheid.
Right.
What the Irish experienced, what the Black South Africans experienced, is true apartheid.
Right.
It is nothing. It is nothing like what happens and is happening in Israel. It is such thing, and every Irish, I'm sorry, but every Irish person who is pro-Palestinian is dishonoring the memory of those who dealt with persucution and apartheid in
even
Ireland.
Eamon de Valera, they're dishonoring.
I mean, they are. It's dishonorable. How else? And dishonor used to mean something,
right?
Honor, that was my other daughter, another one of my daughters was inducted into the
National Honor
Society. And the young lady who gave a talked about honor and what it means to honor someone. And I thought to myself, wow, honor is a word we don't use any longer.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, this whole debate around October 7th, we're seeing that people are dishonorable.
Yeah.
People are shameful. And those things should matter. But,
well, or they're patently ignorant, and the folks who should be educating them are not, and that's a problem. Hey, listen, can we switch gears for a minute, because we've been going for about an hour, and we got to talk about this the speaker's race and where things stand there. We had the first ballot yesterday. I am starting to hear rumblings about Patrick McHenry, Jerry.
Well, here you and I have been talking about Patrick McHenry for a week or 2 weeks now. Listen, if I were Jim Jordan, he fell 20 shorts shy of the gavel yesterday, I would just say, screw it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd just drop out. I mean, that's it. I'm not going through. And the thing is, the what I hear from the Hill is that this is all about, well, McCarthy had to go through 15 votes. So Jordan's going to be the speaker, but we're going to make him go through a bunch of votes as well. It's just petty.
Well, it's also, I mean, they want to extract every ounce of conditions that they can from this situation.
Yeah. Jim Jordan should just drop out. Everyone should just refuse to run. And then I think what happens is you have to have
you need to change the rules, and the speaker pro tem actually has power, and so it becomes a de facto speaker. Yeah, here's a funny thing, right?
Accidental speaker. I'm still looking
think about this
to the accidental speaker.
Well, yeah, but you think about this, and you think about, I look at British history, and there are periods of British history where their parliamentary system went through, and I know Jerry and I disagree about whether or not this is chaos. Went through periods of chaos or uncertainty, if you want to use the C word, or as one of our listeners, Jerry, wrote it in, is spelled it with a K, KAOS, like the evil organization in Get Smart. I had a nice chuckle about that. But the reality is, in the end, that you get the business of the Hill going at some point in time. At some point in time, you gotta get things moving again.
Listen, I don't think it's chaos. I'd rather have a party or a political organization that is arguing and fighting. I would hope they're fighting and arguing over policy and ideas. The Democrats are just, and this is why they're better at politics, they lockstep.
Right.
They're like the good fascist. Everyone just follows the leader.
Well, I mean,
what's worse?
That's the relative.
What's worse?
That's the relative benefit of collectivism,
right? But to all my friends on the right who are like, oh, there's chaos in the House. Oh, the Republicans can't shoot straight. They're shooting each other. Circular firing squad. Oh, would you rather just everyone in lockstep just do what the leader says?
No. What I rather, I'll put this position out there, Jerry. No, it's not that I want them to do everything that the leader says. What I want them to do is behave like adults and actually have a conversation that is substantive, talk about it like adults, come to some kind of decision, and then move forward with it.
I agree, but
hold on, Jerry. And maybe I'm expecting too much, especially when you have members of the caucus giving handies while watching Beetlejuice.
I know, it's ridiculous.
Maybe I'm expecting too much of that party, but does this.
But here's the thing: if we want adult behavior, someone has to model it. Someone has to, right?
100%.
But here's the thing, and so therefore, McCarthy did the right thing and said, "I'm not going to run again. This is nonsense." Scalise should say, "I'm done."
But see,
Jordan. But here's my thing: if the grown-ups all say, "I'm not going to participate in this any longer," then adult behavior will have to carry the day.
I'm not so sure. See, this is the thing, Jerry. I think up until 10 years ago, 8 years ago, you would have been correct, right? Up until then, somebody would have learned this situation. But this is the problem with the era in which virality rules.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Is it so long as these people can draw attention to themselves?
Well, I agree.
You and I weren't on last week, right? Because we've mentioned her on the podcast before. you were on Thursday, and for TJ, I was in for Larry last Wednesday. You know, the Nancy Mace situation is a prime example of this. Now, right? Nancy Mace has a legitimate beef with Kevin McCarthy, right? You're a member of Congress, you got a legitimate beef with the speaker, you join with 7 other Republicans and a couple of hundred Democrats. Let that sink in there for a second.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, we're gonna remove Kevin McCarthy as speaker. You've made a decision, presumably because you have some principled position that you're following, and this is your object lesson based upon that principle. Fine. Then you take your lumps, but you don't turn around and say, okay, well, I'm getting all kinds of negative attention, or maybe I'm not getting enough attention, so I'm going to show up in the hallways of Congress with a white t-shirt, tight white t-shirt, onto which I've painted a big scarlet A, and make some claim that I'm being unfairly maligned for the decision that I've made. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And one of the things that I talked about on the air last week is, somebody else brought this up. I'm stealing it from, I don't remember who. But this is where, it gets into the adults. Part of the problem, Jerry, is you've got young people who don't know, I'm going to use the phrase, who don't know jack shit, who are populating the Hill and making decisions. All they know is how you turn something viral. Up until a couple of years ago, if you were a member of Congress, your comms director would have looked at you and said, are you crazy? Don't do this. This is a bad idea. Are you crazy? A Congresswoman Boebert, you're a just divorced woman. You can go out on dates with people, but how about you dress a little bit more modestly? Maybe you don't go see Beetlejuice. Maybe you don't go see Beetlejuice the musical with a Democratic donor bar owner. And maybe, just maybe, you don't vape and give him manual favors while sitting in your chair in the middle of the public. I digress. The real issue is Nancy
but again, that's why we keep on using this term, the adults in the room, but those who are the serious men and women in the Republican caucus, and there are serious men.
There are, yes.
They ought to just say, we're done with this. We're done.
But Jerry, they're rhinos, Jerry. They're rhinos.
But not, and then I wouldn't even participate anymore. I would not show up for a roll call vote for speaker if the votes weren't there. And I would say, you know what? I'm going to go home and be with my family, my constituents, until you guys figure this out. Which is why I think ultimately what's going to happen is I think Patrick McHenry, Congressman McHenry, is going to become the accidental speaker. Yeah. But however, this is a much deeper problem in our culture.
Agreed.
Our public schools are indoctrinating our children into all kinds of religious philosophies, transgenderism, critical race theory, queer theory. America is this no good, rotten, racist organization or based upon race. Look, why do we send our kids to public schools? Again, we are purposefully sending our children to be indoctrinated in false religions.
Yeah,
and we do it. And universities. I've told my kids. My older girls went to Catholic university. We chose Catholic because we knew that they would encounter liberals and conservatives, religious, non-religious. They would get they would run the gamut ideologically. But that's not true at most universities any longer.
Right.
So why are we sending our children to Harvard? Like, again, I don't understand why. We know it's bad,
it gets
but we still engage it.
Before, if you didn't want to go to Chicago, you shouldn't have gotten on this train.
Right. Look, and to those, and again, I do make these connections, but I'm just, as we're sitting here, I got the Twitter feed is going, and all of these ideologies, these gender and identity ideologies, and being pro Hamas, and they're all connected.
100%. It's the nature of intersectionality, Jerry.
Israelis, I'm going to read this. Israelis are pigs, savages, very bad people, irredeemable excrement. May they all rot in hell. This comes from a leftist trans activist and professor at the School of Art in Chicago, the School of Art Institute in Chicago. Now, Jerry, it's one tweet. It's not one tweet. You look at the trans movement. They are cheering the death of Israelis. Look at the
Listen,
Black Lives
I had
Matter
my
movement
first-
cheering the deaths
I had
of
my first legit bot troll. And I don't know if it's a real person or a bot itself, but I had my first like legit anti-Semitic troll showed up in my feed, courtesy of Dan Gaynor, by the way. I guess Dan he responded to something, and this guy popped in, and it was really interesting. And I called him out on being a bot, you know, clearly a Hamas mouthpiece. I will tell you something else disturbing, Jerry. My movie producer troll. I'm very freaked out by this. I'll say this. Liked 2 of my posts in the last like 36 hours.
Well, look, you know,
It's just really scary to me. This would be clearly maybe I'm doing something wrong here.
Look, there was once a time, you know, what was it? Who was the reporter that sparred with Reagan?
Sam Donaldson.
So Sam Donaldson asked Ronald Reagan, famously,
Mr. President,
Mr. President, you blame the Democrats for this and the Democrats for that and the Democrats for this other thing. Sir, don't you have some blame here? And Reagan, without missing a beat, says, yeah, Sam, I do. I was once a Democrat.
Yeah.
And I think that speaking the truth consistently with humor, with grace, is the only way to push back on these on the evil that we're facing.
Yeah.
But the thing is that good people have to speak up, and good people have to.
Now is the time.
Yeah.
It's never been more important than it is now to speak out. You know, we go through this, and we've said, you know, and for many years it was true. Never again can what happened in Europe from the mid 30s to the mid 40s. Never can that happen again.
Ask your children when they come home from school. Actually, what did you learn today?
All
History
have
class?
A homework assignment. So Hannah Arendt wrote about the banality of email. God Lord, did I really just say that? The banality of email.
You did.
She wrote about the banality of evil. That evil, yes, has the form of people who paraglide into a music festival and kill and rape kids. That's clearly evil. But it's also the callous disregard for your fellow humans. And I urge everybody. Jerry, you still have HBO, right?
I do.
Did you ever watch the movie Conspiracy?
Oh, sure. With
not the Mel Gibson movie.
Oh. Well, that's the name Conspiracy. That's the movie.
No, it was Conspiracy Theory.
Oh, that was Julia Roberts and Mel Gibson.
Yes.
Is this about the Mossad agents?
No, that's a good one too. No, Conspiracy is like a mini play.
I like that I say that, by the way, and you know exactly what movie I'm thinking of.
Yes, that's you're thinking of it's the Steven Spielberg movie, and it's got Eric Bana, and it is called Munich.
No, I was thinking of another movie with Jessica. Is it Chastain? The actress
Jessica Chastain?
Yes.
0 Dark 30?
Where the movie, the premise of the movie is that they're older. These older.
Oh yeah. It's
Jewish.
That one I think may have been called Mossad.
Okay, that's a great movie.
Oh, so and then there's also the House on Garibaldi Street, and whatever the older one, which is about the capture of Eichmann. No, Conspiracy.
What movie are you talking about?
Conspiracy came out in the late 90s, I think, maybe mid 90s. It stars Kenneth Branagh, and it's got a great cast. So in the early 1940s, there was a meeting held in a suburb of Berlin called Wannsee, Wansee, the Wannsee Conference. And in the space of about 4 hours, Reinhard Heydrich and Adolf Eichmann essentially ran a meeting where they came up.
Oh my goodness! Of course, I've seen this.
Yeah, the final
solution. Yes.
For everybody else who hasn't seen
Stanley
it,
Tucci's in it.
Yes, he plays Adolf Eichmann.
The guy who's in the is in all those British movies.
Yes. He was in the Kingsman.
Yes.
That guy. Now Colin Firth.
All right. Yes. I know. All right. Now I know. Great movie, by the way.
Yes. You all need to go watch this movie, because essentially it is how systemic and systematic, because the two are different words, systemic and systematic evil takes hold, and how good men can be manipulated into doing incredibly horrible things.
And also, I mean, what also happened in Germany was good people decided not to say anything.
Exactly. Well, no,
but
Jerry, then that's part of the point in this movie is that there are 3 or 4 participants in the Wannsee conference who are very much opposed to what's happening on a whole host of levels, and yet they were bullied into silence, into their accession with what was happening here. So I urge you all to go and watch that. So Jerry, is it going to be Jordan? Is it going to be somebody else?
I think it's going to be someone else.
I think it's going to be someone else as well.
But I don't care. I really find the whole thing. Give McHenry the gavel and
bring Mia Love back.
Yeah,
let Love.
And
lead.
Also, I think the House not meeting for a couple of weeks is nothing but good.
Yes, it listen. Except we've got to deal with getting money to Israel in this. Oh, by the way, guys, as we've talked about this is, and I meant to bring this up, we are potentially on the precipice of another world war. I mean, we've got Central Europe, we've got the Middle East. All China has to do is want to start some stuff in Taiwan while our backs are turned. And
all right, so I'm going to say this now since you said that.
Yeah.
The most influential book that I ever read, outside of
was the 13th, the greatest of all centuries.
No, outside. I read scripture. I love The Tender Bar.
Great book.
The Federalist Papers. I love history books. But there's a book by Chuck Colson. It's old. It's like from 1987 called Kingdoms in Conflict. It's a nonfiction book that deals with the philosophy of collectivism and Marxism and how the Marxists are impacting world politics and U.S. politics. It's brilliant. It's dated now because you read it and all the references are Reagan and the 80s, that sort of thing. But it's still a remarkable read. But the book opens with a short story about a fictional president and war in Israel. Either Hamas or some jihadi group is warring in Israel, and Israel, I think, goes to take over the dome.
Yeah,
the Dome of the Rock.
Oh yeah.
And again, for my Christian friends and even Orthodox Catholics, one of the signs of the end of days is a reclamation of the dome.
Yeah.
Of the Jews reclaiming the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
That is in the scripture. It's about now it's coming. The tribulation and the the world, the tribulation and the battle of good and evil. And I've thought through all of this because I kind of think that if I were Netanyahu, I would go and take the dome.
Yeah,
I'd take it. But then again, in this book, this president is a Christian president, and there is intelligence reports, and he can stop it, or he can make the attempt to stop it.
Yeah.
And so the whole book is about what he should do. Is he a citizen of the kingdom of God or a citizen of the kingdom of man? Because as a Christian, he's like, well, this is how history unwinds. And if I send troops there, it's going to be ill-fated. They'll die because according to the scriptures, they're going to take the dome anyway.
Yeah.
They're going to take the Temple Mount anyway. My point is that I've talked to a lot of Christian friends of mine, even at my daughter's National Honor Society induction. People ask me all the time, hey, Jerry, how you doing? And my response is I'm blessed. And I usually say, because my Uncle Pat used to say this, I say something like, I'm doing so well, I'm gonna be raptured any second. The rapture is another term or not a term, but this idea of rapture in the great gathering in
yes.
what is called in scripture. Anyway, I said that on this evening, and people were like, "Oh my goodness, Jerry, are you thinking about that too?" My point is that yes, we are on the edge of World War III. And there are a lot of people thinking and praying about this. And I don't know. I'm thinking about it.
Yep, absolutely. We are here as well. Jerry, you are back on
That
Sunday.
That was a long story. I apologize.
It was fine. No, it was good. So you are recording new episodes of your new podcast tomorrow, as am I.
Yep, tomorrow, and I have 3 that are still in the can that need to be released.
In fact, one is probably going up today, I would think.
Yeah,
I think your shows are releasing on Wednesdays.
All right. Your friend and my friend from the Chamber of Commerce.
Yep, Tom Sullivan. I'm seeing him tomorrow.
Sullivan. That's the next one that's coming out.
That'll be good.
Go to I haven't seen my podcasts up yet at the audio venues.
Yes.
It is up at YouTube, and my
lots
show
of hits, lots of viewers, Jerry.
And my show also hasn't been, like, if you go to the Federal Newswire website, you click on podcasts, the Federal News Hour lunch hour is there, the China desk is there, but my show's not yet there.
We'll see if it's happening, but it's up there.
But if you want to find my show right now, go to Federal Newswire, go to the Federal Newswire YouTube channel, and my show's there, but also Andrew's show with Bob
Terrell.
Bob Terrell is fantastic. I'm going to post that at Real Clear Policy. The next time I do a podcast update, I'm gonna include that. It's a really good conversation.
Thank you. We had fun with that one. I'm back in on Monday for Tony Katz on WIBC. Cool. So that'll be fun there as well. Jerry, you're on Sunday. If it's Sundays, it must be Jerry.
It's Sunday, WBAL.
Right there, at 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Good luck with that. Jerry, what do you want people to do?
Find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm. I pray for peace and victory in Israel.
Yeah, God bless Jerry. God bless everybody in Israel. Listen, I always say stay safe. Never more important than it is now. So please stay safe. Have a great week, everybody.
Yep.